Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's seminar. Today we have Bran, which is an adjunct professor at Monash University, and also we have Devi Karolita, and she is finishing now her PhD at the Humanized Lab. So they will be having an introduction to the persona concept and its application in practice. So it is two-part presentation, and in the first part, they will explain the broader category of problems that personas are intended to address and a brief explanation of how personas can achieve that goal. And this will be followed by a general definition of the persona concept and explanation of where and how it can be used. And yeah, like you can see also on the website some related works based related to this talk, so feel free to read the relevant papers. And yeah, of course, let Devi and Bran know if you have any questions at the end. So Bran, so will you start, and you can briefly just introduce yourself, please, to the audience?
Right. Thank you, Omar. I should mention, by the way, that I'm in Canada. It's 9 p.m. here. The temperature is 39 degrees, by the way, so it's almost like Australia. But all I'm saying is that if you have any questions, you can always reach me by email, but you won't be able to reach me by personally if you're hoping to, because of the distance. Okay, so this is an introduction to personas, and as Omar said, let's see. Why can't I? Oh, here we go. It's in two parts. I'm going to cover the very first part one very briefly, and the meat of the presentation really has to do with how personas are used specifically in requirements engineering based on Devi's work, her PhD work, and essentially a study that involved interviewing users and developers. So this is part one. I should mention, by the way, that I'm a novice here, but let's first of all make sure what my job as I see it in this part of the presentation is to give you a rationale for why do we even need this persona concept, because the first time you hear about it, it sounds a bit esoteric and rather untechnical, so to speak. So what is technology really about? I took a definition from the Encyclopedia Britannica, and here you can read it yourself. Application of scientific knowledge to practical aims of human life, manipulation of the human environment, and so on. And of course, you'll notice that human appears in all of this. And really, to a certain extent, and this has been my experience, I'm mostly from industry. I have been involved with academia, but I would say I spent about 50 years in industry. I'm that old. And a few years teaching, including teaching at Monash. But I can tell you that this is something I encountered all the time, which is that, there's, we're technical people. They call us solutionists sometimes. And we're so engrossed in the technology aspects and providing solutions through technology that the whole culture of software engineering may have lost sight of this core business, this core aspect of the human side. And here's my caveat. Here's the embarrassing part. I worked for over 50 years as a software developer, including developing software that is being used by people directly. And I never heard of this concept until a few years ago when I joined the Humanized team. So this is an embarrassing fact for me, but I think it's typical of the whole issue. I should warn you that I have not used the concept in any practical applications that I've worked on, not yet anyways. So this first part is really about my understanding of the concept from talking to experts like Devi and Professor Grundy, thinking about it and so on. It's something I'm working on now as part of a research project. But my advice to all the people who are not in the humanized group is do like I did and understand this concept. So this talk here really has to do with helping you along with that. So I'm going to start with this just to give you a little bit more justification. This is from my personal experience. It's a case study from industry, and it was a case tool, a tool for doing modeling specifically using UML. And this is a screenshot of its user interface. Now, you know, this is obviously mind-boggling when you look at it. You know, first of all, look up here, and there are actually 11 different types of categories of menus. Each of these has a set of own menu items of its own. And then you look at all of this, when you add it all up, there's over 300 distinct menu items. Now that is complicated. And it is not presented in a way, this is a very traditional approach, the way tools are designed, whether they're IDE tools of a general nature for programming and so on, they all kind of look like this, and they're all bad. For example, there's this whole issue. Yes, you might have to take one item from the diagram category and another one from the target RDS, and you have to do them in a specific order. Which is very difficult to keep in mind. And the tool doesn't help you because it actually almost presents everything at once, right? Then there's this whole business of these silly looking icons, which are not all intuitive. In fact, most of them are not. They're supposed to be shortcuts, but you really have to be a deeply an expert in this tool. So the poor human users, and this has been the experience of the people, I've worked with the people who use this tool, and they just don't know. The complexity of this is so mind-boggling that they know what they need to do. They just don't know how to do it with the tool, even if you like expert users. So this is a problem in a sense. Now, why is this the case? In this particular case, well, there was no real understanding of the users, which strangely enough are essentially people like the developers of the tool. It was meant for developers, but they didn't quite understand the way that these people work. And generally, software engineering is highly technocentric. So there's a strong focus on computing technologies, programming languages, and libraries, and so on. And very few people in this domain, any expertise in what has to do with anything has to do with the human side. They're either interested, haven't had the time, or nobody's told them about it, whatever. But most people who are stakeholders in these software applications operate on the human side. So let me give you another example here, which is quite symptomatic. The term end user is used everywhere in software engineering. And that's a part of the problem in many ways. Now, I worked with automotive people, and let's take them as an example of traditional engineering disciplines. You know, they deal with drivers, they deal with passengers. There's a difference between passengers in the front, passengers in the back. There's mechanics. There might be gas attendants or petrol station attendants and so on. And all of these people use the vehicle, but they don't, each one uses it differently. So there's no such thing as an end user concept in these traditional disciplines. On the other hand, if we take a look at the software engineering approach, what you'll find is we take a very reductionist point of view because we're not so much focused and we don't understand the human, if you like, the people side of things that much. We reduce everything. So there's something called end user and there's something called system, which is a tremendously reductionist approach. And that is part of the problem, right? If you look at, we've reduced that complex thing up in the upper left-hand corner to something very simple. And even worse, we've gone further and say with something like use case modeling, the human side which by the way doesn't have to be a human side, but it usually includes humans when it comes to interactive applications. We reduce it to something called an actor. And I think the stick figure is quite indicative of the fact that we are, how we're treating this whole human side of things. Now, if you look at who focuses on what, we have a division of work. The requirements engineers are the people who worry about actors and use cases, and the software developers are the people who worry about code. Okay, so the focus of these people is on code. This is where their expertise is. They're proud of their knowledge. They're proud of their creativity and their ability to use this. And there's a little bit of focus, but not much on the requirements side. They assume that's somebody else's job, and theirs is to just basically do it. But one of the consequences of this is that in many cases, and I can tell you from personal experience, you view as a developer, you often view the user as somebody who is similar to yourself. Okay, and that's a very reductionist. On the other hand, stakeholders are the focus of requirements engineers. And let me go on to stakeholders, because that picture is also often reduced. So there we have the system, and the people who are mostly in direct contact with the system are, of course, the infamous end users, but also, say, people like the system operators. Then this system is always part of some other system, right? So there might be the owner, the people who are actually making money on this system. There's the people who are involved in integrating the system in the greater ecosystem. Then there's the wider environment, investors, regulators, hackers, innocent bystanders. And by the way, another symptom of the system engineering mindset is this Agile Manifesto. When you read the Agile Manifesto, it talks about customers, which is really just a synonym for end user. So to summarize the problem, we have this generalized, simplistic, often biased representation of humans, and it happens in both worlds, in the requirements engineering domain and the software development domain. And the result are tools like one that I illustrated. And I do want to mention this is much more than a usability issue, because in the end, when you look at what the impact is of usability, it's not just a user interface issue. It's essential, or a usability. It goes to the architecture. So let's quickly go on to, as I said, to why and what of the personas concept. An application context for personas is our applications that interact with or in some other way affect human stakeholders. Do keep in mind that it isn't just the end users who are worried about and are the stakeholders. There's all these other people. So the core idea is very simple. Rather than going through this very impersonal, we're going to replace the concept of an end user with a fictional but concrete individual. In other words, we're going to give humanity to this thing. So we replace end user in some cases with people. They are not real people, they're fictitious people. And here's the first definition of what a persona is. And I'll tell you right away, there isn't no consensus on what a persona is. But here's an example of a persona definition. You can see there's a photo just to give it more reality. It's not, like I say, usually not a real person, but look at the highlighted things. This particular person has problem with, can't see the color red very well. She uses the apps that help her find a parking spot, but the apps are based on color coding. So it's a whole story, and in part 2 you'll learn a lot more about how these things are done. So there's two primary overlapping objectives of personas. This is the why: a better understanding and greater empathy with stakeholders, and more human-centered requirement specification. If we focus just on the first part for now, what we want to do is make these people think not of end users, but of people. Not necessarily just those personas, but the persona is there just to give a human aspect to the whole idea of an end user. Right now, there's no consensus on the definition of a persona. As I said, there is one classification. It's in the slide, supplementary slides to my part of the presentation. You can look at it later when we post it. But now it's time for Devi to give you oh, sorry, there's just one more aspect here. Pros and cons of using personas. This is something that I thought about a lot. We already said what the pros are: deeper understanding, better requirements. The thing I want to just mention now briefly is the cons. You can create personas that are unrealistic or inappropriate, either because you don't have enough expertise, which means you really need help from people who are sociologists and so on, or these persona creation tools, which I have used now for a while, and they're all bad because they're all very simplistic, and they can easily lead you into misadventure. For example, in other words, basically, this is that humans are extremely complicated things, right? Any model is necessarily reductionist. You have to approach this whole problem with humility and caution. And here's a summary, and now I let Devi take over.
Okay. I'm going to. That was a nice presentation, Bran.
Oh, you're my
Okay,
best friend.
That's funny. Okay, I'll share my screen, and I hope you can see my screen here.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. It is actually indeed an honor for me to share my persona research study in this occasion. And thank you, Bran, for bringing me along. And this presentation will encompass the findings of my study, which I started in 2020 under the guidance of my supervisors, Professor John Grundy, Dr. Tangela Kanich, Dr. Jennifer McIntosh, and Dr. Humphrey Obi. And a bit disclaimer, like Brand, I'm also new in this area. I just started in 2020. Okay, before I start my presentation, I wish to acknowledge the people of the Kulin Nations on whose land I'm having my presentation today. I pay my respects to their elders, past and present. Okay, it started with my initial encounter with persona. I focused my study in persona incorporation in requirements engineering, since RE is an early stage in software development that demands significant human involvement, including clients and users and other beneficiaries of the software being developed. The primary objective is to guarantee that the software created brings about positive changes in the lives of these beneficiaries. However, maintaining regular access to individuals during RE-related tasks can pose challenges for several reasons, such as the difficulty of assembling a representative group of users, the limitation of access to only a subset of users, and many more. And utilizing personas in RE can effectively address these challenges that may arise during interactions between engineers and then users, where personas can serve as a primary source of information for RE-related tasks. As Bran mentioned earlier, I do understand that the terms like users or end users might oversimplify the diversity of individuals involved and who will gain benefit of the developed software, and this will make them faceless. However, for the sake of this presentation, I'll use the terms user or end users interchangeably to refer to this group of beneficiaries. So in order to have a better understanding of how personas have been used in RE-related tasks, I conducted a systematic mapping study, starting from the research, from the research process to data synthesis, resulting in key findings for the respective research questions. And here are the findings of the SMS. We found that most of personas are presented as text-based and commonly created using qualitative techniques. And in RE-related tasks, personas are mostly incorporated in requirements elicitation and analysis. And we also identified some benefits of incorporating personas in RE and also some challenges or limitations of persona, and some of these challenges have been mentioned by Bran before. And throughout the systematic mapping study, I gathered a collection of text-based personas and observed both similarities and differences in the presentation and content of these personas. Then a question tickled my brain, like, what's in persona? So we found that there are diverse approaches to presenting personas, and human characteristics depicted in personas vary across different domains. However, we also identified commonalities in the human characteristics captured in personas, regardless of the specific domain of application. So this study started by collecting more text-based personas used in RE and SE, or software engineering, and we called it as persona corpus. From this corpus, we extracted the domains of use for each persona, identifying a total of 12 distinct domains, ranging from technology for older adults to transportation. We also extracted the various human factors embedded within the personas, such as demographic information, motivations, goals, concerns, and many more. So the next step, we mapped the persona demographics and categorization of human factors into human facets based on their similarities. The findings of these stages served as the foundation for our persona taxonomy. And we also identified domain-specific human factor recommendations. So later on, we can tailor the taxonomy for use in particular domains. Why we created this recommendation? Because we also acknowledge that persona is a context-specific tool. Here's an example how we extracted the human factors. For example, from this persona, we extracted the name, the age, and then the occupation, and then how these persona use technology, and then their marriage status, technology proficiency, goal, challenges, and so on. So in addition, we observed diverse persona styles, which then are categorized into key styles. In the paper, we referred it as persona dimensions. Those styles are the manner of persona narration, the persona format, and also the length of the persona itself. And the study also revealed that the majority of personas typically include elements such as motivation, goals, and concerns. Here's the example of first style, which is persona narration. We identified that persona can be narrated in narrative approach or in bullet points. And also persona can be formatted either in unstructured manner, structured manner, or semi-structured manner. And for the length of the persona itself, we identified that there are two types of length. First, we call it as the normal length, and also brief persona, where we categorized persona consists of described in less than 10 sentences as brief persona. Based on the analysis, the mapped human facets are divided into two main layers. We try to separate the layers into two main layers, where the internal layer of persona consists of a general background, the information of persona, which falls into personal characteristic group. And the external layer consists of context-specific information depending on the context and or the domain the personas are used in. And we put motivation, goal, and concern in the external layer, since we noticed, based on our persona corpus, that these three human factors are mostly context dependent. We also acknowledge that the taxonomy is quite general, and we embrace the fact that persona is a context-specific tool before we equip the taxonomy with a recommendation that can help us to tailor the persona to be more relevant to the domain of use. For example, here, if we want to create a persona for use in health domain, in the internal layer, we can add physical well-being facet and also mental well-being facet if necessary. And in this in the external layer, we can add skill level of, for example, their health literacy or maybe their socioeconomic status, such as financial situation. So from this study, we identified some major benefits. First, the dichotomy of persona layers can enhance persona reusability, and also this can streamline the process to generate persona. And the domain-based recommendation also can add more two dimensions to reusable personas and make those personas more relevant to the context they are used in. And finally, both the taxonomy and domain-based persona facets recommendation can be useful for early persona validation process to check the richness of persona in terms of the facets present in the resultant personas. Following our analysis of personas that primarily relies on evidence gathered from academic sources, we are keen to understand how the industry perceives and utilizes personas. So to achieve this objective, we conducted semi-structured interviews with 20 software practitioners from various parts of the world. And these interviews aim to gain insights from the practitioners' experiences integrating persona into their project. And following this, we transcribed and analyzed the interviews transcript using a thematic analysis approach. During the interviews, I presented identified persona style to our study participants and asked for their preferences. And I also gained valuable insights on the advantages and also disadvantages of each persona style from our conversations with these practitioners. For persona narration, most of the participants expressed that narrative persona is the strength of narrative persona is for being detail oriented, and it can enhance empathy and it stick more compared to the bullet points persona. However, the description of the persona, if we narrate it in such manner, it can be implicit, which can lead to bias. And also it takes more time to digest what's inside the persona. Whereas for bullet point persona, it is more concise and it is also straightforward, easy to scan. However, it has lack of depth because it's how to say, more simple compared to the narrative persona. And for the persona structure and persona length, we can also see like what are the advantages and disadvantages. And most of our participants preferred to narrate their personas in bullet points and also format them in structured manner and keep the length of the personas brief. It is a bit contrast with our findings of academia preference, where academia prefers persona to be narrated in a narrative approach, unstructured and normal length. And also, the participants reiterated our prior finding that emphasized the importance of capturing motivation, goals, and concerns in personas. And furthermore, they provided reasoning for the necessity of these aspects within personas. For motivation, our participants said that motivation is important because from the motivation we can understand end users' behavior, what motivated them, what drives them to do such action. And furthermore, motivation can help to discover their needs. With goals, our participants mentioned that by looking at the persona goals, they can understand what they want to achieve, and therefore they will then later on when they make assumptions or they make not assumption when they specify requirements, or they will go back and check the requirements against persona goals to ensure that they already meet the persona goals. And for pinpoints, why it is important, because our participants mentioned that by looking at persona pinpoints, they can identify what are the problems that the end users want to solve, and what are the obstacles they want to avoid. So later on, when they specify the requirements, they try to see the problems and how we can give solution to the problem. And then what are the things that that may concern our end users, and what are those obstacles, so we can avoid those in our proposed software. And this is an important thing as well. One of the participants mentioned that rather than focus on what are the solutions we want to offer, first we have to quote unquote fall in love with the problems, try to understand the problems, before we jump to the solution. So the lessons that I learned during this study, I learned from the practitioners that they prefer persona to be presented in effective manner. By effective means that the persona should be concise, straightforward, and well-structured, because we have to acknowledge as well that in industry there are constraints, and having persona presented in such manner help them also to work effectively within the constraints that they have. And we'll also learn that motivation, goal, and pain points are essential because it can help us to comprehend end users' behavior, identifying their objectives, and also recognize their problems. So what can we do next, actually? So what I have in mind at the moment is to understand what are to better understand what are the contributing factors of the success of persona incorporation in RE. Is it the persona that we need to investigate more? Or maybe the people who has relationship with the persona, or who are going to be gain benefits of the proposed software, or the relationship itself. So maybe it can we can gain more idea on how from which perspective we want to have further investigation towards this topic. And another interesting thing, while I'm conducting my analysis, I generated a word cloud as well, because I'm curious, like, oh, what are the most frequent mention words during our conversations, like during my conversations with the study participants. And then after generating the word cloud, I see that the most frequently mentioned words are associated with people and human characteristics. So maybe it also can trigger more ideas on how we can investigate human aspects in software engineering or requirement engineering. And yeah, it needs human to understand humans. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Bran. Thanks, Devi, for the very interesting talk. And yeah, anyone have any questions? So
Actually, Devi, can you go to your slide number 22 while people are thinking about questions?
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
exactly. Like this is the one for the preferences, right?
The one academic versus the practitioner.
Yeah, that's actually like pretty interesting. I didn't fully get it, and because it's like there is major differences. So
Yes,
really
but
interesting.
what I'm seeing here is exactly the issue that concerns me, which is, of course, people want to facilitate things, make it easy for them. So again, I see the concern that I have with the industry preferences. Bullet points, structured brief is another way of reducing the complexity of people to something that is almost templatable, right? And that in many ways defeats the whole idea of personas. I'm exaggerating, but there is that danger that by sticking to bullet points, I mean, if somebody tried to describe you, just think of yourself as a developer or as a person in general, and somebody said, oh, okay, there's 3 bullet points that describe you. You'd be kind of upset because, I'm a little more complex than 3 bullet points. And of course, in a context in particular, I think it becomes a little more complex. So again, I see this desire to simplify the real world, which makes sense when we're dealing with, say, mechanical or physical things or whatever. But when it comes to humans, I'm worried that we're again trying to squeeze complex things into simple squares and triangles and circles. So that, to me sounds like there's a bit of, at least a little bit counterproductive or counter to the idea of personas, which is about empathy and understanding. This is why I said, you have to be humble here. And first of all, deal with people who are experts, psychologists, anthropologists, whatever, sociologists, etc., and understand what they can tell you about. I watch TV shows. Last night I watched a TV show where somebody was asking a psychologist to give him a nutshell, a summary of some criminal, and the psychologist immediately rejected. He said, "No, I can't do that." It's it all starts with a long. Anyways, that's my comment. And my concerns too. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
No, but if you have a look at this, Bran, it's also based on our conversations with those practitioners who prefer persona to present it in such way. But at the same time, they also acknowledge that bullet point, it has lack of depth. And also same thing with structured persona, and it is limiting because we are, let's say, bounded by the format, like a particular format, right? And then if persona is presented in a brief length, less information, and because we have less information, how we can build connection based on limited information presented there. And it will lead us to make assumptions then, because the information is quite limited. And they say good things about narrative persona, unstructured persona in brief, sorry, based on the the interviews, I haven't bumped into the normalized persona. They don't mention anything about that. So at the same time, they're also acknowledging that having persona presented in narrative, unstructured, and normalized has advantages, but they also mentioned that due to the constraints, and also this is the reality, not all of people want to read. That's the thing. So for them, narrative persona, having it in a structured format, it will take time, more time to read, and not how to say, all the team member would like to invest their time to read and to understand the persona. That's but you but from this point of view, I can see that maybe it will trigger some research ideas on how we can work around these limitations, and then how we can present persona in such effective way, but still can what's that convey the no, vibrate the humanity aspects of it.
Right. And the it's very nice that you came across people who were willing to talk about, they realized the red items that you had on that slide. I think the next one, the red items were, or whatever it was, that people said, oh yeah, we understand that there's negatives to this, etc. But I think it was actually maybe the slide before 21. I'm not sure. Or yeah, 21. Anyways, but I'm wondering that one, how typical these people are. If I remember, you mentioned that you had difficulties finding enough people who actually used personas, and it seems that you ran across some very non-representative bunch who are admirable people because they're willing to admit their own shortcomings here. But I'm not sure that's what I'm worried about is the great mass of software developers, and I include my younger self in that, who would look for this easy way of, if you like, pegging people into boxes and so on. And I realize you have to do it because you're under time pressure and so on. However, people must realize that the dangers of this, right? And I'm worried that the vast majority of people don't even believe that there's a need for personas. They think it has to do with maybe telling stories, waste of time, and they prefer bullet points, structured, short form. So that's the concern. But I'm sure, yeah, you basically pointed that out. But I'm not sure that the opinions of the people that you had interviewed and so on are necessarily representative, because the great mass of people, like I say, imagine users and stakeholders as people similar to themselves, and then they're surprised when they find out that people don't understand how to use their software.
So interestingly, Bran, at least not a big number of participants, I can say, but some of the participants, even though in practice they present persona in such a way, but actually they prefer, if they can, they would prefer persona in this way as the academia prefers. And the reason why they prefer those participants express that the reason why they prefer to present persona in this way, because they understand that not all team members are on the same page when they see persona and the importance of persona. And some even mentioned that like a group of a particular group of inside the team members saying that we don't need we don't want to know about the person. We only want to know what we should do. Okay, so
Yes. By the way,
please put in those in personas. Yeah, and some of the participants also mentioned that having the team on the same page when it comes to how they perceive persona is also important. So they all try to raise the awareness of the importance of persona incorporation within the project. So a lot of
Okay, by the
things
way,
have to be done when it comes to
yeah,
persona
I think
incorporation, I can say.
Shen has raised his hand, Shen Ji. So maybe he can ask this question.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello. Very interesting speak. And I also have a question about persona. I will like see the question first, then see the background, why I would like to ask this question. My question is like if there's any possibility or if anyone have already tried to use AI to produce a persona. Why I would like to come up with this question is that I work for a company for several years, and at the first beginning when I started to work, I tried to like use what I learned from the university, like use interviewed people and got a lot of interview data, unstructured data or structured data, then use Vivo that software to analyze each sentence and each words that the user said to produce a like complete persona, like what I did when I was in the university. But like working for like several years, I feel like everyone in the industry feel like you have to produce something very quickly in a very like limited time or very short time. For example, when I have a talk with the users and we got the feedback of the products of the like software, and like for the next day or for the third day you have to produce or you have to give the solution about their questions, so that in this kind of situation I just have no time to like analyze the interview data in a very detailed way. But I don't think you just give a simple solution is a very good way to solve the real world problem. So I'm always thinking if we can use AI or use NLP to help to analyze some unstructured data, some interview data that we collect to help us to work in a more efficient way to produce the persona. So that's why I'm here. I'm looking for some solutions, or like if there's any possibility that can help the people who work in the industry, who want to give a good solution for the users to create a good persona to understand the user in a very good way. But yeah, also we can save time, or we can solve those problems in a limited time if you are have to work to give the solution. Yeah, this is my question. I hope I express my thoughts and question well. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. Any feedback, Devi or Bran? Or
Yeah, thank you, Sanshan, for your perspective and also your question. And actually, how's it like? I had a nostalgic feeling when I heard what you have expressed before, because I heard that also from practitioners that I interviewed before, because in the industry they have they call it like triple constraint, like time, budget, and also the feasibility, right? So it's something that we cannot put aside actually when we talk about the practice in real world. And speaking of the use of LLM to create persona, actually at the moment, currently we are doing that. We're trying to investigate how good LLM to help us to produce a persona. Even though like the idea of persona generation tool can be limiting to some extent, but also there are some good benefits that can come out of it. One of at least some of the benefits are it can help those who are new to the concept, and also it can streamline the process of creating personas. So currently we are developing a persona generation tool and with the help of LLM as well to create the persona, and trying to how to say it. And later on, of course, we are still on the development phase at the moment, and then later on we want to investigate and evaluate whether this approach works or not, and hopefully we can present our findings soon.
Oh, that's
Yeah, but
cool. So
it's too early to for me it's too early to how to say to report any findings, because we're still playing around with it, because one of the our how to say attention is that the prompts, because we need to how to say to craft the prompt in such a way the persona that is generated is believable enough, reliable enough, and many aspects that we need to investigate more, right, or to evaluate. Yeah, but I cannot say much about that at the moment, but yeah, fingers crossed.
Yeah, I would say it's a research topic at this point, and and Devi is looking at it among other things.
Perfect. So any other questions before we end the session? All right, so thanks a lot, Bran and Devi, again for the very interesting talk, and I hope everyone will have a great rest of their day. Thank you, and
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.